Welcome back to the Danny Mac podcast. I'm the Mac part of it. Coming up in just a moment, I'm going to invite a guy who played for the Patriots for 8 years to pull up a chair. Rob Ninkovich from the southwest suburbs, Lincoln Way East High School by way of Purdue, is going to join us. And wait till you hear what he says about Robert Kraft and ownership and how that parlays into success on Sundays, sustained success. Speaking of parlays, kick me. This is the time I tell you about the Bet Rivers same game parlay. Pick two in any game and prosper. You can pick as many as you'd like, but if you win, you hit a square on the same game parlays and you can earn bonus bets, profit boosts, and jackpots up to $10,000. That's the same game parlay. Double dip it like I like to do on Sundays whenever the Bears go at it. They're laying 6 against New England this weekend with a total of 39. It's the same game parlay from Bet Rivers.
You're now watching the Danny Mac podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
It seems so weird to know so little about the New England Patriots, but that's where we are in 2024. So rather than pretend, I'll pick the brain of an expert, former Patriots linebacker / D end, depending on how you want to clarify the position these days. Rob Ninkovich, the local guy, joins us. He's done a bunch of media in Boston these days, coaching his kids, being a dad. Rob, thanks for the time. I don't know jack about your football team, man, and they must not be real good because the Bears are favored by 6.
Well, you're right, because I know the Bears have been struggling too. So when you look at this Patriot team, years past they would always have primetime games, and it helped all markets watch the Patriots. And you have Tom Brady, you have all the championship teams. So I think now it's been 5 years, and they haven't really done much. So you move on from Bill, and you bring in Mayo. They draft a young quarterback. You got Drake Maye in his rookie season, who looks promising, similar to the Chicago Bears quarterback that they picked #1 overall. Definitely some growing pains, but I think, the Patriots this year, they're trying to turn the page on the past and try to move forward. They're going to have to find some pieces this offseason. They're going to have to draft offensive linemen. They're going to have to find a number one receiver. Those are all things that this team needed. They had to win in the draft. So I think this year they won with Drake Maye. He's a very good quarterback. Last week I think he had 95 yards rushing, over 200 yards passing. He had at the end of the game was able to throw up a pass and got the game into overtime. So as far as the offense and the Patriots having a quarterback, I think they found their future quarterback. So it's not a question of, can this guy be the future here? It's, can we build this roster? Can we get enough talent around this kid to protect him, number one, because I think he's got the highest pressure rating in the NFL. He's getting, a lot of pressure on him. Can we protect him? And then can we give him some targets? You look at Chicago right now, they got a young quarterback. They kind of have similar issues, right? They got a young quarterback. There's some pieces that they need to get to help him elevate his game. And, the Patriots are in a similar position.
Certainly not at the skilled position, but the offensive line has been musical Bears. That's been really the history since you started watching the Bears when you were playing at Lincoln Way East, for Christ's sake. It's been a long time. What does Drake Maye do best? What will I say? Man, Ninkovich really knows the game. He told me that on Friday or Thursday that this guy does this well. What is it?
No, I think it's his keeping his eyes downfield. A lot of young quarterbacks, when they get in a situation where they have to scramble and look for space, they look at the rush, and they actually take their eyes off of the receivers, and they look at the rush, and then it messes up their timing. He does a good job of keeping his eyes downfield, feeling the rush, avoiding the rush, buying time, and either running for a first down and scrambling, or waiting for his receivers to uncover while he has the awareness of the rush. So there's a lot of quarterbacks, they could even be veterans. They're able to get out of the pocket, but they've lost sight of who they have in their routes.
Mm-hmm.
And Drake does a good job of taking what the defense gives them. And if there's a guy open down the field and he can run for the ball, run for a first down, he's still going to try and throw the ball down the field. A lot of young guys, they panic and they just start to run. He's always going to be patient and look for the guy. And if it doesn't come open, then he'll pull the ball down and take what the defense gives him running the football. So I would suspect if you're a defender for the Bears, you're going to have to spy and be more zone. If you're in man, everyone's back's turned, and then you only have one guy to beat. So the defensive line starts at front. The defensive line, they can't just run past the quarterback. Worst place to be is behind the quarterback in passing situations because you can't do anything. You can't help. You can't be in a passing lane. So the front has to be more of a bull rush mentality, stay in front of Drake May, and similar to the Patriots, how they're gonna approach this game defensively. There's gonna be two defensive mindsets where it's not pin your ears back and run up the field. It's, hey, let's bull rush and get more pocket crushing, which is, when I used to play for the Patriots, we used to call it a crush rush. Instead of running past and trying to get around people, you try to go through people and make the pocket like a phone booth. You want to have these guys in a phone booth trying to make throws from inside the pocket, which makes them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about ownership because that's been a problem in Chicago for about 105 years, basically since the NFL was formed.
McCaskey's?
Yeah, beginning with Papa Bear. Oh, he was just a piece of work too. What's it like? You spent 8 years in a Patriots uniform. What's it like to play for one of the best owners in sports? At least that's my read on Mr. Kraft.
Well, I would say that in every successful organization, you got to have key leadership, not just from the top, but it's all throughout. So you have leadership at the top that makes the decisions on, okay, who are we giving the power to run certain things, and then it trickles down, and all the way when you go through the whole organization, you got to have pretty high accountability and high standards. And I think when we were winning a lot of football games, it was a perfect storm of, from the top to the coaching to the players to the support staff to the doc to everybody, they all had a high standard and they all weren't willing to accept anything but winning and the best. And to create that type of culture, I think in 2024 it's probably a little bit more difficult to do that because now you have all these kids coming in from the NILs and the transfer portals, and you're trying to build a military mindset in a team setting, because that's just what the military, you go and you sign up you sign up for the military. What do? They shave your head, you go through boot camp, and they give you a number. Similar to football, when you go to training camp, you get a number. Your identity is supposed to become what the team is, and the team is supposed to have a common goal, which is to win and to go for championships. That's what the Patriots were able to do for so many years, and every great team does that. Now, how do you do that today? I think it's really hard to do that, when you have all independent contractors that are trying to sell themselves versus building teams. And that's when you have to have the ownership and make the decisions on, okay, who's the best coach for this? How do we get a coach in here that can balance players' personalities and trying to create a winning culture, similar to what we've seen with, Detroit, for example, right? First couple of years, you got Dan Campbell, who's got like that, like almost like a wrestler mindset, like, hey man, we're going to bite kneecaps off. But it's building these guys up mentally, emotionally, knowing it's a physical game, and you build the right group of guys that, when you get it all together, it works, right? So it's hard to get it together, but when you can do that, that's when you have special.
Now, you mentioned your journey to the NFL, and it starts as a junior college player before you get to Purdue.
Yep.
And you're a fifth round pick. You get bounced in New Orleans and wind up in Miami after a knee surgery. And then you mentioned the 0-10 start. I mean, it's amazing how luck plays such a part in good fortune or end of our career. But I got to ask you about that Miami experience. You said 0-10. Was that Cam Cameron or Tony Sperano? I can't remember 07s, but I think it was Cam, right?
Yeah, it was Cam Cameron. so that particular season, I got released by New Orleans on a road game, on a Thursday night football game in Indianapolis, which is very rare. First game of the season, they released me on the sideline before the game. Um, so they released me. I stayed there with the team. I flew back with the team. I got claimed by Miami. They played week 1 in Washington. So I literally jumped on a flight Friday, flew to Miami, jumped on the team charter for Saturday, went to their first home game, was inactive. And it was that '07 season was a complete fiasco, shambles. It was terrible. No leadership, no accountability. That's why they were a 1-win football team. So I really didn't have any opportunities in '07. The GM told me that I wasn't. His actual words were, "Nobody here wanted you. I like you." So it was Rick and Randy Mueller, they're brothers. So Rick was the head scout for the Saints. So he drafted me, and he liked me. Like, he thought I was a good football player. That's why the Saints drafted me. Randy was the GM for the Dolphins. He liked me as well, but nobody else did. So he was like, "Hey, after this season, maybe next year we'll get a new staff in here that will give you an opportunity." Well, then they all got fired. And then Parcells came in 2008 with Sperano. He was the president. And Parcells liked me. He was, the first thing he said to me was like, "Hey, you remind me of a guy I drafted in New England." And that was Teddy Bruschi. So he moved me to inside linebacker, which I had never played before. But my experiences with Bill, I talked to him a few months ago. He's actually tremendous. He was great for me in my career. If you think about it, my whole football career, I was all Parcells. It was Sean Payton. Um, Parcells kept me there in '08 to be an inside backer. Didn't work out. Bill picked me up in '09, but then it was Bill Belichick. So, that mental side of being coached by those guys, it's not an easy way to be coached, but I'm used to it. Like, you're used to being coached hard, and that's what you want. You want somebody that's going to call you out on something and push you to be the best player you can be.
Was it a surprise to you, as it was so many of us here, as Bears fans were hoping for a coaching change? Belichick is available. Vrabel is available.
Yeah.
Freaking
Yeah.
Pete Carroll is available. The Bears even passed on Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator, maybe because Eberflus felt threatened. I don't know. But we're living in a world where last year's dead man walking, and Eberflus is among them, came into the season as a favorite to win coach of the year, and other guys don't have jobs. It's crazy.
It's the NFL. I mean, I think there's a lot of things beyond just, you look at Tennessee, right? Vrabel being fired in Tennessee, you question how that happens. Certain coaches get extensions and then they don't win many games after that. There's a lot of things that go into winning and losing. It's not just, your X's and O's. So it comes down to ownership. It comes down to, hey, who we paying, what previous contracts do we still have in place that were guaranteed to other coaches? Because coaches have guaranteed contracts. You look at Miami right now. They give their head coach an extension. He's going to get paid through this next whole presidency. So, it's kind of wild to think like, hey, I could be guaranteed 4 years or 50, 60, 70 million dollars. It's kind of wild. Like, a lot of these coaches are looking at the money sign and they're saying, hey, if I can just get to this spot, I'm going to be set up for forever, So it's turning into a very, very lucrative big business.
Do you watch enough of the Bears to have a really good, qualified opinion on their coaching staff?
I wouldn't say that I have watched enough to say their staff is adequate or not. I would say that, there's a few instances where, you look at the last play of the Commanders game, for example, like, that is a play that should never happen. If it does happen, you definitely don't have a player that's looking into the stands while the play's going on. So I think there's a lot of things that go into how you running the team, what's the discipline, what's the accountability. I don't have enough of a sample size to say that it's still working there or it's not. But I think as the season progresses, when things are not going your way, if they get worse, then you kind of get an understanding of who has a good control over the guys in the locker room.
What do you like about Caleb Williams from what you've seen?
I think he's got a heck of an arm talent. Like the guy can make all the throws. He's he's a guy that can get out of the pocket and he can hurt you with his legs. So when you have that, it really puts a lot of stress on the defense to what coverage are you going to run? Are you more man? Are you more zone? Your defensive line has to understand rush lanes and they can't just run past him because he can step up and open up lanes. So, I think he's got a bright future, but it's up to him on how serious he takes his own career. Like that's the one thing about the NFL. Everyone's talented, but there's a mindset that you have to excel. And
Mm-hmm.
you can be a really talented football player, but you run out of talent eventually. You got to rely on being smart, being, dedicated to the game and limiting outside distractions. That's what Tom, I played with the best to ever do it. And Tom was able to be unbelievably over the top when it came to focus, leadership, preparation, accountability, all those things that you need as a football team. He was the perfect example of that. So if Williams can follow that type of seriousness where guys are going to follow him, then I think he's got a bright future.
Mm-hmm. I have to go back because I forgot to do it when you said it, to being released in Indianapolis before a game. I've heard of that in baseball. Carlton Fisk of the White Sox once they took him to
Yeah.
Cleveland so he could buy his own ticket to the game. He sat out in the bleachers and taunted his teammates. I've not heard of that. What was the explanation for that? That's not very gentlemanly.
The explanation was they needed a third quarterback. So I was going to be inactive because I had an MCL injury. So I was coming back from my ACL injury. I tore my MCL in the same knee. I was braced up. So they said, hey, like, we're going to have you inactive this week anyway. We need a third quarterback for some stupid reason that they needed a guy to not play. So they released me thinking that if they did it on game day, I would maybe not be claimed off waivers. But that being a Thursday and teams having that extra day, the team would have to cut somebody on the roster on a Friday to bring me in. And I guess Miami said, screw it, let's pick Ninkovich up. And they had to cut somebody to bring me in.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about the bucket game, and you played in two of them.
Yeah.
Rob, you were too when I went to my first bucket game as a reporter, and Rod Woodson of the Boilers, God, one of my favorite players in college football history, had himself a day on both sides of the ball. If I read this correctly a few days ago, you had 4 sacks in each game against Indiana. And I don't know what
Yeah.
the Boilers are going to be getting on the last Saturday in November when they get to IU. Did you ever think we'd live long enough to see Indiana as a 14-point favorite over Michigan this weekend?
No, never, never. I mean, those were the two teams that I was being recruited to, IU and Purdue. And at the time, IU was not the team that you wanted to go to. Purdue had just been in a bowl game and they had Kyle Orton. So I decided to go to Purdue. And, it's pretty, I always like to say Indiana helped me get drafted because 8 sacks in 2 years against one team is always going to help your cause for getting drafted. But, they've been able to build something pretty special there, and if they continue to do that, it's kind of rare air down there in Hoosierville.
Mm-hmm. You were at Purdue at a pretty special time, too. 5 years or so after Breeze left, but Kyle Orton I thought Orton was sailing his way toward a Heisman Trophy visit at least before he got hurt against Wisconsin in the homecoming game. God, I've got a good memory. And you were there. I think that was the
Yeah.
0-4 game when he almost got his kidney lacerated, but that was a special
Yeah.
time in Boilermakers history, too, with Cowboy Joe Tiller.
Yeah, we had a good run that season. I think we were number 5 in the country in that game. That sucked to get knocked off because then we went on like a skid after that one. Kyle was pretty screwed up. It was a 4th and 1. He ran for the first down. He got hit on both sides of his midsection and screwed himself up for the next 6 weeks. But after that game, we weren't 5 in the country anymore. So it was tough. That was a year that we had high expectations, Kyle. Which fast forward to my first career NFL sack, it was against Kyle Orton. That's kind of crazy how that happens. But no, Joe Tillard. The Boilermakers were a tough football team. You had Brock Spack as the defensive coordinator. Mark Hagan was my recruiting D-line coach who went to IU. His dad was a coach there at IU in the 80s. Mark Hagan actually played linebacker for the Hoosiers. So, yeah, we were a good football team. And, rest in peace to Joe Tiller. He was a great man, and he helped me in my career immensely moving forward with my dream.
Loved everything he did there. So I'm trying to think of which Bears tackle would have relinquished that first Ninkovich sack. Is it 07? Is it your first year, 08?
No, so my first sack against Kyle, he was with the Broncos in 09.
Ah, okay.
So that was when he was a Bronco. Yep.
Was trying to guess which Bears turnstile.
Yeah, but Kyle liked his Jack Daniels, so I was my official visit was with Kyle Orton. So I had a wild time with Kyle. He was always a fun time.
Are you a Bears fan? Last thing, are you a Bears fan? Did you grow up loving the Bears in the Southwest Burbs?
My parents always were big Bears people. When we had like Cade McNown, those were tough times. So it was. I was more so a fan of the winners. So when I was in the 90s, I was a Cowboys kid. I mean, I liked the Cowboys, but I would always watch the Bears every Sunday. My mom would always have the '85 Bears stuff, and my mom was a huge Chicago Bears fan, so it was always on in the house. But as a kid, I had the Cowboy stuff in the bedroom.
Yeah. Cade McNown, 25 years ago this season, the 12th pick in the draft. And everybody, he eluded everybody's wrath because there were so many bad picks above him, like Tim Couch and others. Rob, a pleasure to visit with you. Thanks a bunch. Who wins Sunday, Bears or Patriots?
So I just did my pod, and I think the inability for the Patriots to run the ball is going to affect them a little bit. So I'm going my hometown Bears.
Okay. Well, this could be what they need. The Bears gave up 200 plus to Arizona last week, so it'll be fun to watch. And they're missing Andrew Billings, who makes Vince Wilfork look like an underwear model, for Christ's sake.
True. Well, the Pats ran for like 14 yards with running backs last week, so that's not a good sign.
Rob, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
That's Rob Ninkovich. He spent 8 years in a Patriots uniform, and I want to thank Randy Merkin, who gets all of our guests for us here on the Danny Mac podcast, and Sam Michael, my executive producer. A job extremely well done, as always. Adam Delavitt runs the show for the Bet Rivers Podcast Network, and we also thank Troy Mocker and Alex Pastor for everything they do. Have a great weekend. Bears are laying 6. I'll be back shortly after the ball game to assess either a 5-4 start to their season, you want to call 9 games a start, or coming apart at the seams for another 7 days before the Packers come calling. I'm Dan McNeil. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching.